The California sun, usually a comforting presence, felt like a spotlight on my carefully constructed life. At 37, I thought I had it all figured out. A thriving career as an architectural designer, a beautiful home in the upscale Pacific Palisades neighborhood of Los Angeles, and a marriage to Mark that, while not always perfect, felt like a solid foundation. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 7, and had navigated the usual bumps and triumphs of modern life with a shared sense of humor and a mutual respect I cherished. Our home, a sprawling mid-century modern with panoramic ocean views, was my pride and joy, a testament to years of hard work and a shared vision. It had a charming guest house nestled among the bougainvillea in the backyard, a space we typically reserved for visiting family or close friends, or, sometimes, a quiet retreat for me when deadlines loomed. It was a sanctuary, a place of peace, until Veronica arrived, Mark's ex-wife, Veronica. The name itself felt like a discordant note in the symphony of my life. They'd been divorced for 15 years, a brief, tumultuous marriage that Mark rarely spoke about, dismissing it as a youthful mistake. I'd met Veronica only once, years ago, at a mutual acquaintances party. A fleeting, polite exchange that left no lasting impression beyond a vague sense of her being intense. So when Mark casually dropped the bombshell over a Tuesday night dinner that Veronica needed a place to stay for a few weeks, while her apartment in San Francisco was being fumigated, and that he had offered her our guest house, my carefully curated world tilted on its axis. "She's in a bind, Clara," Mark had said, his fork hovering over his pasta, his eyes avoiding mine. "Her landlord messed up the dates, and she has nowhere to go. It's just for a little while. She's family, in a way." Family. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. I swallowed, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Family? Mark, she's your ex-wife. We have a guest house, yes, but it's not a charity hotel. And why didn't you discuss this with me first?" He sighed. A familiar gesture of exasperation that usually signaled the end of a discussion rather than the beginning. "I didn't think it was a big deal. It's just a few weeks. She'll be out of our hair. Besides, it's the right thing to do. She's really in trouble." The right thing to do was Mark's go-to phrase when he wanted to bypass my input. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. It wasn't just the invasion of my private space. It was the unilateral decision, the assumption that I would simply acquiesce. I prided myself on being a reasonable person, but this felt like a boundary trampled. Yet, I bit back the sharp retort that hovered on my lips. Mark had a way of making me feel unreasonable when I pushed back, turning my valid concerns into emotional overreactions. "Fine," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "But just a few weeks, Mark. And she needs to understand this is a temporary arrangement." He beamed, relieved. "Of course. You're the best, Clara. I knew you'd understand." I didn't understand. Not really. Veronica arrived 2 days later, not with a couple of suitcases, but with a moving truck. A small one, yes, but a moving truck nonetheless. It pulled up our long, winding driveway, an unwelcome harbinger of chaos. I watched from the kitchen window, a mug of herbal tea growing cold in my hands, as she directed 2 burly movers to unload boxes, not just into the guest house, but also, inexplicably, into our main garage. Mark, ever the chivalrous host, was out there, all smiles and solicitous gestures, helping her carry a rather large, ornate mirror. My jaw tightened. When she finally entered the main house, her eyes, a startling shade of green, swept over me with an unnerving intensity. "Clara," she purred, her voice a low, throaty murmur. "How lovely to finally see you again. Mark has told me so much about this beautiful home." She extended a perfectly manicured hand, her grip surprisingly firm. She was older than I remembered, perhaps in her late 40s, but impeccably dressed in a tailored linen suit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek, severe bun. She exuded an air of self-possession that was both admirable and, in this context, deeply unsettling. "Welcome, Veronica," I managed, my smile still fixed, still brittle. "I hope your stay is comfortable." "Oh, I'm sure it will be," she replied, her gaze lingering on a framed photo of Mark and me on the console table. It's so generous of you both. Especially Mark. He's always been such a good man, hasn't he? The emphasis on he was subtle, yet unmistakable, implying a shared history, a deeper understanding that excluded me. Over the next few days, the few weeks arrangement began to stretch, not just in time but in scope. Veronica was everywhere. She'd leave her designer coffee cups on our kitchen counter, use our main laundry room, claiming the guest house's machine was too small, and even started joining us for dinner, uninvited, her presence filling the room with an almost palpable tension. She'd recount anecdotes from her and Mark's past, laughing at inside jokes that left me feeling like an outsider in my own home. "Remember that trip to Aspen, Mark?" she'd say, her eyes sparkling. "When you accidentally locked us out of the cabin in a blizzard? Clara, he was such a mess." Mark would chuckle, a little too heartily, a little too quickly, then glance nervously at me. I started noticing other things. Her car, a sleek, expensive European model, was always parked conspicuously in our driveway, never in the guest house's smaller, more discreet spot. She received packages delivered to our main address, not the guest house. And then there were the phone calls. Mark would often disappear into his study, or step out onto the patio, his voice hushed, whenever his phone rang. When I'd ask who it was, he'd vaguely say, "Just a work call," or "My mom." But a few times, I'd overheard snippets of conversation. A woman's voice, not his mother's, and once, a distinct Veronica, before he quickly closed the door. The unease escalated into a gnawing suspicion. This wasn't just a temporary stay. It felt like an infiltration. One evening, after Veronica had regaled us with another story about her and Mark's glory days over a dinner I had cooked, I finally confronted Mark, my voice low and steady, once Veronica had retreated to the guest house. "Mark," I began, folding my arms, "this is getting out of hand. She's been here for almost 2 weeks, and it feels like she's moving in. And all these stories about your past, it's disrespectful." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Clara, don't be dramatic, she's just trying to be friendly. And she really is having a tough time. Her apartment building has more issues than she initially thought. It might be a little longer." "A little longer?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "How much longer, Mark? Because this isn't what we agreed to. And frankly, your behavior is making me uncomfortable. You're secretive, and you're letting her walk all over us." His eyes hardened. "I'm not being secretive, Clara, and I'm not letting her walk all over us. I'm being a decent human being. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of being so territorial." The word stung. Territorial. As if I were a jealous child, not a wife whose home and marriage were being subtly undermined. We argued, a tense, clipped exchange that ended with him retreating to his study and me, fuming, alone in the living room. The silence in the house, usually a comfort, now felt oppressive, filled with unspoken resentments and growing doubts. That night, I lay awake, the ocean breeze rattling the windows, my mind racing. Something felt fundamentally wrong. It wasn't just Veronica's presence. It was Mark's defensiveness, his evasiveness, the way he seemed to prioritize her comfort over my own. The trust that had been the bedrock of our marriage felt like it was crumbling, grain by grain. I needed answers, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that Mark wasn't going to give them to me. The seed of suspicion had taken root, and it was demanding to be watered. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The following morning, a cold resolve settled over me, replacing the previous night's anger. I was an architectural designer. My entire profession revolved around meticulous planning, structural integrity, and uncovering hidden flaws before they became catastrophic. It was time to apply those skills to my own life. I started small, with observations. I noted Veronica's comings and goings, the time she left the guest house, the time she returned. I paid closer attention to Mark's phone habits, the way his eyes darted to his device whenever a notification pinged. The more I looked, the more the pieces of a disturbing puzzle began to emerge. One afternoon, while Mark was at work and Veronica was supposedly out running errands, I decided to take a closer look at the guest house. I told myself I was just checking for supplies, ensuring she had everything she needed. But the truth was, I was looking for clues. The guest house, usually pristine, had a lived-in feel that extended beyond a temporary stay. There were personal photographs on the bedside table, not of Veronica, but of her and Mark from years ago, clearly predating our marriage. A framed certificate from a local community college, dated just last year, for a California real estate license. My stomach dropped. Why would she need a real estate license if she was just staying for a few weeks? And why was it displayed so prominently? My gaze fell upon a stack of mail on a small desk. Curiosity, a dangerous but compelling force, took over. The top envelope was addressed to Veronica Hayes, C.O. Mark Reynolds, 123 Ocean View Drive, Pacific Palisades, California. Our address. Not a temporary forwarding address, but a permanent one. And then I saw it, a bank statement, partially obscured, but enough to see the name of a local bank, and a recent transaction for a substantial amount, far more than someone in a bind would have. The pieces were beginning to fit, forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. Later that day, I subtly brought up the real estate license with Mark. "I noticed Veronica has a real estate license," I said, trying to sound casual as I chopped vegetables for dinner. "Is she looking for a new place in LA?" Mark stiffened, his back to me as he poured himself a drink. "Oh, that? Yeah, she got it a while ago. Just a hobby, I think. She likes looking at houses." His voice was too quick, too dismissive. A red flag. That night, after Mark had fallen asleep, I slipped out of bed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I needed more. I went to Mark's study, a room he usually kept meticulously organized. I knew his habits, his hiding places. I found it tucked beneath a stack of old tax documents in his desk drawer, a thick file labeled VH Property. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were not just documents related to Veronica's San Francisco apartment, but also correspondence with a local real estate agent, and, most damning of all, a series of emails between Mark and Veronica, dating back months. They weren't overtly romantic, but they were filled with a conspiratorial tone, discussions about the plan, the next phase, and securing the future. There were floor plans, financial projections, and, sickeningly, sketches of renovations for our guest house, transforming it into a permanent residence. And then, I saw it, a printed email, highlighted in yellow, from Veronica to Mark. "I can't believe Clara still doesn't suspect. It's almost too easy. Once the guest house is officially ours, we can finally put everything into motion. She'll never see it coming." Ours. The word echoed in my mind, a cold, hollow sound. The guest house, the one I had designed, the one I considered my sanctuary, was part of their plan. My breath hitched. This wasn't about a temporary stay. It was a calculated invasion, a deliberate attempt to undermine my marriage and my home. The betrayal hit me with a physical force, a wave of nausea washing over me. It wasn't just Mark's affair, if that's what this was. It was a betrayal of trust, a calculated deception that had been unfolding right under my nose, in my own home. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, the documents spread out on the study floor, the cold light of the moon illuminating the depths of their deceit. There were subtle references to the main property in some of the emails, discussions about its value, its potential. It was clear they weren't just eyeing the guest house, they were eyeing everything. My home, my life, my future. The audacity, the sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. By dawn, the nausea had receded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The tears I expected didn't come. Instead, a fierce, protective instinct ignited within me. They thought I didn't suspect. They thought it was too easy. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. This wouldn't be a story of a woman destroyed by betrayal. This would be a story of a woman who fought back, who used her intelligence and her resources to reclaim what was hers. I gathered the documents, carefully placing them back in the file, then returned it to its hiding place. I moved through the house, a ghost in my own home, observing Mark as he slept soundly, oblivious to the storm brewing. My mind, usually focused on architectural blueprints, was now drawing up a different kind of plan, a strategy for survival, for justice, for reclaiming my life. The game had begun, and they didn't even know they were playing. Paimais, the days that followed were a masterclass in controlled composure. I moved through my life with a deceptive calm, a serene smile masking the maelstrom of emotions swirling within me. I continued my work, designing beautiful, functional spaces for clients, while in the quiet hours I meticulously designed my own counter-strategy. My architectural training had taught me the importance of understanding underlying structures, of identifying weaknesses, and of building with foresight. Now I applied that same rigor to the crumbling edifice of my marriage. Kotabaha, my first step was to secure my own position. I discreetly contacted a trusted financial advisor, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who had helped me manage my personal investments for years. I scheduled a routine review of my portfolio, but my true intention was to ensure all my assets were protected and easily accessible. "I'm considering some significant changes in my life, Sarah," I told her vaguely, "and I want to make sure I'm prepared for any eventuality." She was perceptive enough to understand the unspoken implications, offering her support without prying. Next, I turned my attention to the legal landscape. I didn't want to tip my hand by consulting a divorce attorney just yet. Instead, I reached out to a colleague from my university days, a brilliant real estate lawyer named David Miller, ostensibly for advice on a complex property dispute for a client. "David," I explained, "I have a hypothetical situation involving a property with a guest house, a shared living arrangement, and some ambiguous ownership claims. What are the legal ramifications if one party attempts to assert ownership over a property they don't legally hold title to, especially if there's a pre-existing marital agreement?" David, ever the legal eagle, provided a comprehensive overview of property law, marital assets, and the nuances of squatters' rights, all without realizing the personal nature of my inquiry. His advice was invaluable, confirming my suspicions about Veronica's lack of legal standing and highlighting the importance of clear documentation. He also mentioned something crucial. "The ultimate trump card in any property dispute, Clara, is always the deed. Whoever holds the deed holds the power." The deed. A simple piece of paper, yet in that moment it felt like a weapon. Our home, the mid-century modern masterpiece, was a significant asset. Mark had always handled the mortgage and property taxes, and while my name was on the deed, I hadn't seen the physical document in years. It was stored in our safe deposit box, a shared key, a shared trust. Howers. 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 I needed to see that deed. Howers. The opportunity arose a few days later. Mark was out of town on a business trip to New York, and Veronica was, for once, out of the guest house, attending what she called a real estate networking event in downtown LA. I seized the moment. I drove to the bank, my heart thrumming with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The process was straightforward, almost anticlimactic. I presented my ID, signed the necessary forms, and within minutes, the heavy metal box was placed before me. Inside, nestled beneath old passports and family heirlooms, was the deed. I pulled it out, my eyes scanning the official language, the legal jargon. And there it was, clear as day. Clara Reynolds, sole and exclusive owner. My name. Only my name, not Mark's, not Mark and Clara Reynolds, just Clara Reynolds. A wave of dizzying relief, followed by a surge of furious understanding, washed over me. This house, this home they were plotting to take, was mine. Mark had insisted on putting the house solely in my name years ago, a gesture he'd framed as a romantic declaration of trust, a way to protect me if anything ever happened to him. At the time, I'd been touched by his thoughtfulness, never questioning the underlying implications. Now it was clear. It was a legal shield he had unwittingly provided me, a shield against his own betrayal. He must have forgotten, or simply assumed, that because he handled the finances he still had ultimate control. How utterly deliciously ironic. Veronica and Mark's entire scheme, their calculated invasion, was built on a fundamental miscalculation. They were attempting to seize a property they believed was jointly owned, or at least easily manipulable. But it wasn't, it was mine. The power shifted, decisively, in that moment. The game wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about strategic victory. I carefully photographed the deed with my phone, multiple angles, ensuring every detail was captured. Then I replaced it, locked the box, and returned to my car, a new sense of purpose propelling me forward. The pieces of my strategy were falling into place with satisfying precision. The next few days were a blur of calculated actions. I consulted with David Miller again, this time explicitly about my marital situation, providing him with the evidence I'd gathered, the emails, the bank statements, the real estate license. He was stunned. "Clara," he said, shaking his head, "this is a level of premeditation I rarely see. You have an incredibly strong case." He outlined the legal steps for eviction, for divorce, for protecting my assets. He also advised me on how to handle the inevitable confrontation, emphasizing the importance of remaining calm, factual, and legally unassailable. I also began to subtly shift the narrative within our social circle. When mutual friends would ask about Veronica's extended stay, I would respond with a carefully crafted blend of concern and vague discomfort. "It's been an adjustment," I'd say, a slight pause before adding, "Mark is so good-hearted, always wanting to help, sometimes to a fault." This planted seeds of doubt about Mark's judgment, rather than directly accusing him. I also made sure to mention, in casual conversation, how much I loved my house, how I had designed every detail, how it was truly my sanctuary. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The tension in the house became almost unbearable. Veronica, emboldened by Mark's absence and her perceived progress, became even more brazen. She started leaving her personal items in the main living areas, a book on the coffee table, a scarf draped over a chair, as if slowly, subtly, claiming territory. She'd hum loudly while I was on work calls, or ask Mark pointed questions about our shared finances during dinner, questions that felt like probes. Mark, meanwhile, seemed increasingly stressed, caught between her escalating demands and my quiet, watchful presence. He was a man walking on eggshells, unaware that the ground beneath him was about to crack open. The final straw came one evening when I returned home from a late meeting. Veronica was in the kitchen, casually rummaging through our pantry, humming to herself. "Oh, Clara," she said, not even turning around. "I was just checking if you had any more of those organic oats. I'm running low in the guest house and I thought, since we're practically family now, I could just borrow some." "Practically family," she said, as if it were a done deal. As if her presence was a permanent fixture, an accepted reality. I looked at her, standing in my kitchen, rummaging through my pantry, her casual entitlement a stark contrast to the betrayal I now fully understood. The cold calm I had cultivated for weeks solidified into an unshakable resolve. The time for subtlety was over. The time for the reckoning had arrived. I took a deep breath, the scent of the organic oats filling the air, and prepared to deliver the truth. The air in my kitchen crackled with an unspoken tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Veronica stood by the pantry, her hand still hovering over the organic oats, her back to me. Her casual entitlement, the way she had just assumed she could borrow from my supplies, was the final spark that ignited the carefully banked fire within me. The time for subtlety, for quiet observation, for strategic planning, was over. It was time for the truth to be unveiled. "Veronica," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, calm and steady, yet carrying an undeniable edge that made her stiffen. She slowly turned, her green eyes wide with a fleeting surprise that quickly morphed into a practiced, innocent smile. "Oh, Clara, I didn't hear you come in. Just looking for those oats. You know, for breakfast tomorrow. I'm trying to eat healthier." I took a step closer, my gaze unwavering, refusing to be drawn into her charade. You won't be needing them, Veronica. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean, I continued, my voice gaining a quiet power, you won't be staying here tomorrow, or any day after that. The color drained from her face, replaced by a pale, almost translucent quality. What are you talking about? Mark said. Mark doesn't get a say in this, I interrupted, the words precise, deliberate. This is my house, my property, and I'm asking you to leave. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger replacing the shock. Your house. Don't be ridiculous, Clara. This is Mark's house. Our house. We built this life together. No, I countered, pulling out my phone and bringing up the photo of the deed, holding it up for her to see. The image of the legal document with my name highlighted starkly contrasted with the casual domesticity of the kitchen. This is my house, Veronica. Clara Reynolds, sole and exclusive owner. Mark put it in my name years ago. A gesture of trust, he said. Turns out it was a very useful one. Her jaw dropped, a raw, unmasked shock finally breaking through her carefully constructed facade. Her eyes darted from the phone to my face, then around the kitchen, as if seeing it for the first time through a different lens. The casual confidence she had exuded just moments before evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. That's not possible. Mark would never. Oh, but he did, I finished for her, a cold satisfaction spreading through me. And he seems to have forgotten that crucial detail, just as you seem to have forgotten that your little scheme was built on a foundation of sand. She recovered quickly, a flash of something akin to predatory cunning returning to her eyes. This is ridiculous. A trick. Mark would have told me. He wouldn't let you do this. He didn't know, I stated simply, the truth a sharp blade. He thought he was still in control. Just like you thought you were. But you both underestimated me. You underestimated the woman whose home you tried to steal, whose life you tried to dismantle. I watched her, a strange detachment settling over me. The woman standing before me, stripped of her pretense, was no longer a threat, but a study in human vulnerability. I know about the emails, Veronica. I know about the plan. I know about you and Mark plotting to take this house, to make the guest house officially yours. I know about your real estate license and your plans to quote, everything into motion. I know it all. Her face went from pale to ashen. She took an involuntary step back, bumping into the pantry door. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. She looked trapped, like a cornered animal, her usual poise completely shattered. You have 24 hours, I continued, my voice unwavering, to pack your belongings and leave this property. If you are not gone by this time tomorrow, I will involve the authorities and pursue every legal avenue available to me, including charges of trespassing and attempted fraud. And believe me, I have all the documentation to back it up. I watched her process this, the shock, the anger, and finally, the dawning realization of the depth of her predicament. Her eyes, usually so calculating, were now wide with a genuine fear. You wouldn't. Try me, I said, a chilling calm in my voice. You came into my home, under false pretenses, with the intention of taking it from me. You conspired with my husband. You underestimated me. And now you will face the consequences. I walked past her, retrieved a glass from the cupboard, and filled it with water, taking a slow, deliberate sip. The mundane action seemed to underscore the finality of my words. She stood frozen, her eyes darting around the kitchen, as if searching for an escape route, a hidden door, a way out of the trap she had walked into. I suggest you start packing, I added, my voice softer now, but no less firm. And you might want to call Mark. He's going to have a very interesting conversation when he gets back from New York. I left her standing there, a statue of defeat in my kitchen, and walked out into the cool evening air of the patio. The ocean breeze, usually a soothing presence, now felt like a cleansing wind, sweeping away the dust of deceit that had settled over my home. The confrontation had been difficult, but necessary, and in its aftermath I felt a lightness, a sense of liberation I hadn't realized I was missing. The battle for my home, for my sanity, had officially begun. And I, Clara Reynolds, was ready for war. The silence of the night was no longer oppressive. It was the quiet before the storm, a storm I was now prepared to weather. The taste of victory, though still nascent, was already sweet on my tongue. The next morning dawned with a crisp, almost defiant clarity. I had slept surprisingly well, the heavy burden of suspicion replaced by the sharp edge of resolution. Veronica was still in the guest house, her car still parked in the driveway, a defiant statement in itself. But I knew it was only a matter of time. The clock was ticking. Mark called me from New York, his voice a strained mix of confusion and anger. Veronica had clearly wasted no time. "Clara, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his usual calm replaced by a frantic edge. "Veronica just called me, hysterical. She said you're kicking her out? And something about the house being in your name only? What kind of sick game are you playing?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was the conversation I had anticipated, the one I had prepared for. "It's not a game, Mark, it's the truth. And it's time you faced it." I laid out the facts, calmly, methodically, the way I would present a design proposal to a difficult client. "Yes, the house is solely in my name. You put it there, remember? And yes, I'm asking Veronica to leave. Not just because she's overstayed her welcome, but because I know about your plan. Your and Veronica's plan to take this house from me." Silence stretched across the phone line. A long, agonizing pause. I could almost hear his mind racing, scrambling to find an excuse, a denial, a way out. What plan are you talking about?" he finally stammered, his voice thin. "Don't insult my intelligence, Mark," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "I found the emails, the ones discussing the plan, the next phase, securing the future, the ones where Veronica talks about how easy it is. Because I don't suspect. The ones where you both discuss renovating my guest house into your permanent residence. It's all there, Mark, every sordid detail." Another silence, this one heavier, more damning. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Clara, I can explain, it's not what you think. Veronica, she was just going through a hard time. I was trying to help her. We were just talking, brainstorming. It never meant anything. It meant enough for you to conspire behind my back," I countered, the anger finally beginning to seep into my tone. "It meant enough for you to let her move into my home with the intention of taking it. It meant enough for you to lie to me, repeatedly. Don't tell me it never meant anything, Mark. It meant everything. It meant the destruction of our marriage, built on a foundation of deceit." "Our marriage?" he scoffed, a sudden burst of anger from his end. "You're divorcing me over a guest house? Over a misunderstanding?" "I'm divorcing you, Mark," I clarified, the word divorcing feeling strangely liberating as it left my lips. "Because you betrayed my trust. Because you allowed your ex-wife to infiltrate our home with a clear agenda to take it from me. Because you lied, manipulated, and conspired. The guest house is just the symbol of a much deeper betrayal. And yes, I've already consulted with an attorney, David Miller. He's excellent. And he agrees I have an incredibly strong case." The mention of David Miller, a respected real estate lawyer, seemed to hit him harder than anything else. He knew David's reputation. The frantic energy on his end of the line dissipated, replaced by a stunned silence. "Clara, please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can talk. I'll make Veronica leave. I'll do anything." "It's too late for that, Mark," I said, my voice firm, final. "The trust is gone. You made your choices. Now you'll live with the consequences. I expect you to respect my request for Veronica to leave, and when you return, we will discuss the terms of our separation. I've already changed the locks on the main house. You'll need to make arrangements for your belongings." I hung up before he could respond, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. The conversation had been brutal, but necessary. The unraveling had begun. Later that afternoon, Veronica's moving truck returned. I watched from my office window as she supervised the loading of her boxes, her movements stiff, her shoulders slumped. She didn't look up at the house, didn't meet my gaze. The defeat was palpable. By sunset, the guest house was empty. cleared of all her belongings, a silent testament to her failed scheme. Her expensive car, once a symbol of her brazen presence, was gone from the driveway. A small victory, but a significant one. The first domino had fallen. The days that followed were a strange blend of quiet solitude and intense activity. With Veronica gone, the house felt lighter, cleaner, as if a toxic cloud had lifted. But the void left by Mark's betrayal was immense. I immersed myself in my work, finding solace in the precise lines of architectural drawings, the tangible creation of new spaces. My clients, thankfully, provided a welcome distraction, their projects demanding my full attention. David Miller, my attorney, moved swiftly. He drafted the necessary legal documents, initiating the divorce proceedings and outlining the terms of separation. He advised me to change all shared accounts, credit cards, and passwords, effectively severing all financial ties with Mark. It was a painful yet empowering process. Each step, though difficult, felt like a reclamation of my autonomy, a rebuilding of my life on solid ground. Mark returned from New York a few days later, not to the home he thought he controlled, but to a reality he had clearly not anticipated. He called me from a hotel, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "Clara, I can't believe you actually changed the locks. This is insane. You're overreacting." "I'm protecting myself, Mark," I replied, my voice calm. "And my property. My attorney will be in touch with yours. All future communication will go through them." He tried to argue, to plead, to manipulate, but I remained firm, refusing to engage in the emotional theatrics. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by a stranger consumed by self-pity and denial. The unraveling of our marriage was swift and brutal, a testament to the fragile foundation it had rested upon. Word began to circulate through our shared social circles. The whispers started subtly, then grew louder. "Did you hear about Clara and Mark? Veronica's staying with them?" "No, she's gone. Clara kicked her out." "And the house is in Clara's name?" The narrative, initially shaped by Mark and Veronica's carefully constructed facade, began to shift, slowly, irrevocably, towards the truth. Friends called, some offering sympathy, others expressing shock, a few a quiet understanding. I responded with a measured dignity, neither confirming nor denying the swirling rumors, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. The truth, I knew, would speak for itself. The fallout was messy, painful, but ultimately liberating. The old life was crumbling, making way for something new, something stronger, something authentically mine. The immediate aftermath of Mark's departure and Veronica's eviction felt like living in a vacuum. The silence in the house, once filled with the mundane sounds of a shared life, was now profound. It was a silence that allowed me to hear my own thoughts, to process the raw emotions that had been suppressed for so long. The initial shock and anger began to recede, replaced by a deep, aching grief for the future I had envisioned, the partnership I had believed in. But beneath the grief, a new sensation began to stir, a quiet, fierce determination. I was an architectural designer. My life's work was about transformation, about taking existing structures and reimagining them, making them stronger, more beautiful, more functional. It was time to apply that same principle to my own life. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about rebuilding, about redefining who Clara Reynolds was, independent of a marriage that had almost consumed her. My first step was to reclaim my physical space. The guest house, once a symbol of invasion, became a canvas for renewal. I stripped it bare, removing every trace of Veronica's presence. I then redesigned it, not as a temporary dwelling, but as a dedicated creative studio for myself. A space bathed in natural light, filled with drafting tables, material samples, and an expansive view of the ocean. It would be a place of pure creation, a sanctuary for my professional passion, a tangible manifestation of my independence. The renovation became a therapeutic process, each swing of the hammer, each stroke of paint, a release of pent-up emotion, a step towards healing. Professionally, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. My clients noticed a change, a sharper focus, a more decisive approach. I took on more challenging projects, pushing the boundaries of my own creativity. I designed a stunning, sustainable home in Malibu, a multi-million-dollar project that demanded every ounce of my skill and attention. The long hours in my new studio, surrounded by blueprints and models, became a refuge, a place where I could channel my pain into purpose. The satisfaction of seeing my designs come to life, of creating beauty and functionality, was immense, a powerful antidote to the destruction I had recently experienced. My reputation as a visionary designer grew, attracting new, high-profile clients who valued my unique blend of artistic vision and practical expertise. Socially, things were more complex. The initial flurry of calls and texts from mutual friends slowly tapered off. Some relationships, built primarily around my marriage to Mark, faded away. Others, however, deepened. My sister Sarah became an unwavering pillar of support, her pragmatic advice and fierce loyalty a constant comfort. My colleague Liam, an architect I had known for years, offered not just professional solidarity but a quiet, empathetic ear, listening without judgment as I navigated the emotional complexities of my unraveling life. These genuine connections, forged in the crucible of adversity, proved more valuable than any superficial social circle. I also began to carefully curate my public narrative. When I attended industry events or social gatherings, I presented myself with quiet confidence, focusing conversations on my work, my passions, and my future plans. I never badmouthed Mark or Veronica, never dwelled on the past. Instead, I projected an image of resilience, of someone moving forward with dignity and purpose. This measured approach allowed others to draw their own conclusions, often more damning than anything I could have said directly. The whispers about Mark's poor judgment and Veronica's audacity continued, but I remained above the fray, a silent, powerful force. My attorney, David Miller, continued to handle the legal proceedings with surgical precision. Mark, initially defiant, quickly realized the strength of my position. The deed, the emails, the documented pattern of deception, it was an undeniable mountain of evidence. His own lawyer, a seasoned but less aggressive practitioner, advised him to settle quickly. The divorce, though emotionally draining, became a relatively straightforward legal process. We divided assets, negotiated terms, and officially severed ties. The final decree arrived on a crisp autumn morning, 7 months after Veronica's arrival. It was a thin document, yet it represented the end of one chapter and the definitive beginning of another. The financial settlement was favorable to me, securing my independence and allowing me to invest further in my business. I purchased a small, undeveloped plot of land adjacent to my Pacific Palisades home, with plans to expand my property, creating a larger, more private estate. This acquisition was more than just a financial move. It was a symbolic act, a reclaiming of territory, a physical manifestation of my expanding life. The land, with its sweeping ocean views, felt like a promise of future possibilities, a blank canvas awaiting my vision. As the months passed, the raw wounds of betrayal began to heal, replaced by scars that served as reminders of my strength, not my pain. I started a new journal, not to document grievances but to reflect on my journey, on the lessons learned, on the woman I was becoming. I rediscovered old hobbies, took up new ones. I started hiking the trails above the Pacific, finding solace and clarity in the vastness of the ocean and the rugged beauty of the landscape. One evening, as I stood on my newly renovated guest house studio balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, I felt a profound sense of peace. The guest house, once a symbol of invasion, was now a beacon of my resilience. The home, once threatened, was now more truly mine than ever before. Mark and Veronica were distant echoes, their actions having served as an unexpected catalyst for my own transformation. I had not just survived, I had thrived. I had rebuilt my life, stronger, clearer, and more authentically myself than I had ever been. The storm had passed, and I had emerged, not broken, but forged anew. The future stretched before me, a vast, open landscape, ready for my design. The months following the finalization of the divorce settlement brought a profound sense of quietude to my life, a stillness that was both unfamiliar and deeply comforting. The legal battles were over, the emotional storms had passed, and the echoes of betrayal finally began to fade into a less insistent hum. My home in Pacific Palisades, once a battleground of deception, now felt truly like a sanctuary, a canvas for the vibrant new life I was meticulously crafting. The renovated guesthouse studio was a testament to this new beginning. It hummed with the quiet energy of creativity, filled with the scent of freshly printed blueprints, the soft scratch of charcoal on paper, and the occasional whir of my 3D printer, bringing conceptual models to tangible life. My professional life flourished with an intensity I hadn't known was possible. The Malibu project, a sprawling eco-conscious estate overlooking the vast Pacific, consumed the majority of my waking hours. It was a complex undertaking, demanding innovative solutions for sustainable materials, integrated smart home technology, and a design that harmonized with the dramatic coastal landscape. Each challenge was a welcome distraction, a puzzle to solve that demanded my full intellect and artistic vision. The clients, a discerning couple from Silicon Valley, were delighted with my work, their trust and enthusiasm fueling my passion even further. Their constant praise and the increasing demand for my unique architectural style felt like a balm to the wounds of my personal life. My reputation began to precede me, not just locally, but within the broader circles of high-end, sustainable design. Inquiries poured in from across California, some even from out of state, hinting at a national presence for Clara Reynolds designs. Beyond the major projects, I started to explore smaller, more personal endeavors. I began sketching ideas for a community garden in a disadvantaged neighborhood in Los Angeles, envisioning a space that would not only provide fresh produce, but also foster a sense of unity and pride. This passion project, though still in its nascent stages, offered a profound sense of purpose beyond the commercial demands of my business. It was a way to give back, to use my skills to build something truly meaningful for others, reflecting a shift in my own priorities from personal acquisition to communal contribution. The idea excited me, a quiet fire burning within, promising to blossom into something significant. Socially, I found myself drawn to a different kind of connection. The superficial friendships that had orbited around Mark and our shared social scene naturally dissolved. Instead, my bond with my sister Sarah deepened immeasurably. She was a grounding force, a voice of reason, and an endless source of quiet strength. Our weekly calls became therapeutic sessions, filled with laughter, occasional tears, and the shared comfort of sisterhood. She visited often, her easy presence a welcome antidote to the lingering solitude. We spent hours walking along the beach, discussing everything from business strategies to the nuances of human relationships, solidifying a bond that had perhaps been neglected during the years of my marriage. Liam, my colleague from the architecture firm, also became a consistent presence. Our professional collaboration expanded into genuine friendship. He possessed a quiet wit and a sharp intellect, and his passion for innovative design mirrored my own. We found ourselves spending evenings discussing architectural theories, sharing insights on challenging projects, and occasionally just enjoying a quiet dinner. There was no romantic undertone, simply the comfortable camaraderie of two professionals who deeply respected each other's work and enjoyed each other's company. He was a safe harbor, a reminder that genuine connections still existed outside the confines of romantic entanglements. His unwavering belief in my abilities, his gentle encouragement, and his insightful critiques helped me refine my craft and grow as a designer. He often pushed me to consider new materials, explore unconventional forms, and challenge traditional notions of space, which ultimately led to some of my most innovative breakthroughs on the Malibu project. One afternoon, as I was reviewing some final details for the Malibu plans in my studio, an unexpected email popped up in my inbox. It was from a renowned architectural magazine, Architectural Digest International, requesting an exclusive feature on my work, specifically highlighting the Malibu project and my approach to sustainable luxury design. They wanted to interview me, photograph my home and studio, and discuss my journey as a leading female architect. My heart did a little flutter. This wasn't just a validation of my professional success. It was a powerful recognition of my voice, my vision, and my resilience. It felt like the universe acknowledging that my phoenix-like rise from the ashes of betrayal was not only complete, but also worthy of celebration. The article would undoubtedly catapult my career to an entirely new level, opening doors I hadn't even dared to dream of. It was a moment of profound vindication, a public affirmation that my struggles had led to something truly extraordinary. The weight of years of quiet effort and the recent emotional turmoil finally felt justified. This wasn't just about design anymore. It was about defining my legacy. As I responded to the email, a sense of anticipation bloomed within me. The photo shoot and interview would require meticulous planning, an opportunity to showcase not just my designs, but the philosophy behind them, the journey that had shaped my artistic voice. I began to envision the narrative I wanted to convey, one of resilience, innovation, and the power of embracing change. This feature would be more than just an article. It would be a statement, a testament to my unwavering commitment to my craft and my unyielding spirit. It would also be a subtle, yet powerful message to anyone who doubted my strength or my ability to thrive independently. The old narrative of Clara Reynolds, the wife, was being overwritten by a new, more compelling story. Clara Reynolds, the visionary architect, unbound and utterly self-defined. The future, once uncertain, now stretched out before me, brimming with exhilarating possibilities. The news of the Architectural Digest International feature spread like wildfire through my professional network and, inevitably, through what remained of my old social circles. The calls and emails of congratulations poured in, a stark contrast to the whispers that had followed my divorce. It was gratifying, of course, to be recognized for my work, but I also felt a strange detachment from the praise. The true reward wasn't the external validation, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had built this, brick by emotional brick, after everything had crumbled. Amidst the influx of well wishes, one particular email stood out, stopping me dead in my tracks. It was from Victoria Chen, a former mutual friend of Mark and mine, a woman I hadn't heard from since the early days of my separation. Her email was brief, but its content sent a chill down my spine. "Clara, I need to talk to you, urgently. It's about Mark and Veronica. There's something you need to know. Please call me." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had carefully insulated myself from anything related to Mark and Veronica, building a fortress of indifference around my emotional core. Now, Victoria's email threatened to breach those walls. My first instinct was to ignore it. What more could there be to know? What information could possibly be worse than what I had already endured? But a flicker of unease, a nagging curiosity, compelled me to pause. Victoria had always been discreet, not one for dramatics. If she was reaching out like this, it had to be significant. I called her later that evening, bracing myself. Her voice was hushed, almost conspiratorial, confirming my suspicion that whatever she had to say was sensitive. "Clara, thank you for calling," she began, her tone laced with a nervous urgency. "I debated reaching out, but I felt like you deserved to know. I ran into Mark and Veronica last week. They were together, at an event downtown." My jaw tightened. "And what does that have to do with me, Victoria? My divorce is final. They're free to be together." I tried to sound nonchalant, but a prickle of irritation was undeniable. The thought of them together, openly, after all the subterfuge, was still grating. "No, Clara, you don't understand," Victoria pressed, her voice lowering further. "They weren't just together. They were gloating. And they were talking about you, about how you're so focused on your career that you missed everything. And Mark, he said something. Something about getting back what's rightfully his. He mentioned the new land you bought, the adjacent plot. He seemed obsessed with it, saying you were developing his legacy." A cold dread seeped into my bones. "What exactly did he say, Victoria?" My voice was barely a whisper. The idea that Mark was still fixated on me, on my property, even after the divorce, was deeply unsettling. "He was laughing, Clara," she recounted, her discomfort evident. "He said you were so predictable that you'd always go for the bigger, better thing." And Veronica was agreeing, nodding, smiling. She said something about the long game. It felt sinister, Clara, like they're not done, like they still have some kind of plan. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Mark's casual disdain for my career, his belief that I was too absorbed to notice his deceit, his sudden interest in the land I had acquired. It all coalesced into a chilling possibility. Victoria, did they mention anything specific? Any dates, any names, any kind of strategy? No, nothing concrete, she admitted, sounding frustrated. Just vague, taunting comments. But the way they looked, Clara, like they had some secret. And Mark kept mentioning how much research he'd done. He was drinking, so maybe it was just drunken bluster, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I thought you should know. I thanked Victoria, my mind reeling even as I tried to maintain a calm exterior. After hanging up, I paced my studio, the familiar comfort of the space now tinged with an insidious fear. Getting back what's rightfully his. The long game. These weren't the words of people who had simply moved on. They were the words of conspirators, of individuals who felt wronged and were plotting retaliation. The thought of Mark, driven by a wounded ego and a sense of entitlement, teaming up with Veronica, whose cunning was undeniable, was a terrifying prospect. My instincts, honed by past deception, screamed at me. This wasn't over. My ex-husband and his former now current partner were still playing a game, and I was still the unwitting target. The peace I had painstakingly built felt suddenly fragile. My gaze fell upon the architectural plans for the new land, the expansive vision of my future. Was this what they were after? My burgeoning success, my growing wealth, my independence. I called David Miller, my divorce attorney, first thing the next morning. He listened patiently as I recounted Victoria's disturbing revelations. It sounds like a threat, Clara, he confirmed, his voice grave. Even if it's vague, it's enough to warrant heightened vigilance. Mark is still legally bound by the terms of your divorce settlement. Any attempt to interfere with your property or your business would be a serious legal offense. However, without specific details, it's hard to anticipate their next move. What can I do? I asked, my frustration mounting. The idea of living under the shadow of their potential malice was unbearable. For now, keep doing what you're doing, he advised. Continue to build your empire. That's your best defense. And most importantly, document everything. Any strange occurrences, any further quote-quote chance encounters, any veiled threats. Keep a detailed log. And if you have any contact with them, let me know immediately. I'll reach out to Mark's attorney, reminding them of the terms of the settlement and the potential for legal repercussions should he or Veronica attempt to harass or interfere with you. The conversation with David offered a modicum of reassurance, but the underlying anxiety remained. The echoes of the past, I realized, were not just whispers but active, menacing voices. The peace I had found was not absolute. It was a temporary reprieve, vulnerable to the machinations of those who refused to let go. I felt a surge of renewed defiance. I had fought for my home, for my life, and I wouldn't let them undermine it now. This new threat, however nebulous, only strengthened my resolve. I would not be defined by their malice, nor would I allow their bitterness to derail my future. The game, it seemed, was far from over, and this time I would be even more prepared. The seeds of a new beginning had been planted, but the ground still needed to be guarded. Victoria Chen's warning about Mark and Veronica's continued machinations settled like a low, persistent hum in the background of my life. It was a subtle anxiety, never fully dissipating, forcing me to remain vigilant even as I immersed myself in the demanding schedule of the Architectural Digest International photo shoot and interview. The day arrived with a flurry of activity, stylists, photographers, and journalists swarming my home and studio, transforming it into a meticulously curated set. Every angle, every detail of my life and work was scrutinized, polished, and captured for the world to see. It was an exhilarating, yet exhausting, experience, a public display of my hard-won success. During a break in the photo shoot, as I was reviewing some proofs, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. I almost dismissed it, but something compelled me to answer. "Clara Reynolds," I said, my voice crisp and professional. A moment of silence, then a familiar, honeyed voice, laced with feigned sweetness. "Clara, Darling, it's Veronica. My blood ran cold. My grip on the phone tightened. Veronica, I responded, my tone flat, betraying no emotion. To what do I owe this? Unexpected pleasure? Oh, don't be like that, Clara, she purred, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. I just heard about your big magazine feature. So exciting. You know, Mark and I were just talking about you the other day. He was so proud of you. He always knew you had it in you. A cynical laugh threatened to escape me. Mark proud of me? That's a new one. And please, don't pretend you're calling out of goodwill, Veronica. We both know better. Her tone shifted, losing its saccharine facade. All right, fine. Cut the pleasantries. Look, Clara, I'm calling because there's something Mark wants to discuss with you. About the divorce settlement. He thinks there were irregularities, and he believes he has a strong case to revisit some of the terms. Irregularities? I scoffed. My attorney, David Miller, is one of the most meticulous and respected lawyers in California. There were no irregularities. Everything was legally sound and thoroughly documented. The settlement is final. Oh, is it? She countered, a sneering quality entering her voice. What if I told you Mark has found a loophole? Something that was overlooked? Something that could potentially nullify the entire agreement and force you to renegotiate everything? My mind raced. A loophole? It seemed impossible. David had been so thorough. But the sheer audacity of her claim, combined with Victoria's warning, sent a jolt of alarm through me. That's preposterous. There's no loophole. Isn't there? She drawled, enjoying my discomfort. Mark's been doing a lot of research, Clara. He's very clever when he sets his mind to it. He thinks you got away with too much. Especially that adjacent land you bought. He considers that part of his legacy. You know, something he always intended for future development. That land is legally mine, Veronica, I retorted, my voice sharp. Purchased with my own funds after the divorce was finalized. Sure, she conceded, a mocking tone creeping into her voice. But what if he can prove that you used funds that were, shall we say, questionably acquired during the marriage? Or that certain assets were undervalued to your benefit? This was a bald-faced lie, a desperate attempt to intimidate me. But the very mention of questionably acquired funds and undervalued assets was a direct attack on my integrity, a veiled threat of public scrutiny and legal entanglement. You're bluffing, Veronica. You have nothing. Oh, we have something, Clara. Something very interesting. But Mark is willing to be magnanimous. He's willing to meet with you. Just you. No lawyers. A private discussion. To avoid a messy public battle that could damage your shiny new reputation. The trap was evident. A private meeting, without my attorney to discuss renegotiating a final divorce settlement? It was a classic intimidation tactic, designed to isolate and pressure me. Yet, part of me, the part that hated living under the shadow of their malice, wanted to confront them, to expose their lies directly. But the smarter part of me, the part that had learned from past mistakes, knew better. Veronica, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil I felt. You can tell Mark that any discussions regarding the divorce settlement or any other legal matter will take place exclusively through our respective attorneys. There will be no private meetings. And any attempt to harass me or interfere with my property or business will be met with swift and decisive legal action. I have no doubt David Miller would relish the opportunity to add a new chapter to his legal victories against you two. I paused, letting my words sink in. And one more thing, Veronica. This loophole you're so confident about. I'd be very interested to see what fabricated evidence you've managed to concoct. Because the truth, unlike your schemes, tends to be remarkably resilient. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a magazine feature to finish. Don't call me again. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly, but a newfound resolve coursing through me. This wasn't just about a potential legal battle. It was about asserting my boundaries, about refusing to be intimidated. Their attempt to destabilize me, to cast a shadow over my moment of triumph, had backfired. Instead of fear, I felt a resurgence of the fierce protectiveness I had for my life, my home, and my burgeoning career. I immediately called David Miller, recounting the conversation in detail. He listened intently, his quiet hum of agreement occasionally punctuating my narrative. "Excellent, Clara," he finally said. "You handled that perfectly. You didn't give them an inch. It confirms my suspicion that they're fishing, trying to find a weakness. Mark is clearly still obsessed with control, and with, quote, winning. I'll send a stern letter to his attorney, reiterating the finality of the settlement and warning them against any further harassment or frivolous legal threats. We'll be prepared for anything they throw at us, but I suspect this is mostly bluster." His words were reassuring, yet the conversation with Veronica had planted a seed of doubt, a gnawing question about what research Mark had supposedly done. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, some hidden aspect of their plan, that I still hadn't uncovered. As the photographers continued to click around my studio, capturing images of my success, I felt the unsettling sensation of a larger, unseen game being played, with pieces I couldn't yet identify. The public celebration of my achievements was happening simultaneously with a private, insidious threat. My success, I realized, was not just a personal triumph. It was also a target. And this time, I wouldn't just defend. I would proactively seek to understand the full extent of their continued malice, and then I would dismantle it. The game was indeed still on, and I was about to become a much more formidable player. My peace had been disturbed, and now I would find out why. The revelation, I sensed, was just around the corner. The phone call from Veronica, with its thinly veiled threats and audacious claims of a loophole, had shattered the fragile peace I had painstakingly built. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of the Architectural Digest International photo shoot, a public affirmation of my success that now felt tinged with a bitter irony. How could I celebrate my achievements when the shadows of my past were still lurking, plotting, and attempting to undermine my hard-won stability? David Miller's reassurance about Mark's bluster provided little comfort. My instincts, sharpened by years of navigating complex architectural challenges, and, more recently, by Mark's profound betrayal, screamed that this was more than just idle threats. There was a genuine, insidious undercurrent to Veronica's words, a confidence born not of arrogance alone, but of a perceived advantage. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark, in his wounded pride and desperate attempt to win, had stumbled upon something, or perhaps been guided to something, by Veronica's more cunning mind. My previous investigation into their affair had been focused solely on their intent to usurp my home. Now I needed to broaden my scope, to look beyond the obvious, to anticipate their long game. My first step was to delve into Mark's financial history, not just within the bounds of our marriage, but preceding it. While David Miller had handled the divorce settlement with meticulous care, focusing on equitable distribution of our marital assets, he hadn't delved into Mark's historical dealings, or any potential hidden premarital financial entanglements that might resurface. I couldn't ask David to embark on a speculative fishing expedition without concrete justification, so I decided to start with my own research. I began sifting through old documents, tax returns, and investment statements that Mark had left behind, papers I had once dismissed as irrelevant clutter. I was looking for anything unusual, unexplained large deposits, sudden shifts in investment strategies, any mention of obscure trusts or partnerships that had not been fully disclosed during our divorce. It was a tedious, mind-numbing task, sifting through years of financial minutiae, but I approached it with the same meticulous detail I applied to a complex architectural blueprint. Every number, every date, every signature was scrutinized. My focus soon narrowed to a period roughly 2 years before our marriage. Mark, then a relatively unknown real estate developer, had suddenly acquired a significant portfolio of distressed properties. He'd explained it away as a lucky break, an opportunity he'd seized through a connection. At the time, consumed by the excitement of our burgeoning relationship, I hadn't pressed for details. Now, that vague explanation set off alarm bells. How did a budding developer with limited capital suddenly gain access to such lucrative deals? I cross-referenced these property acquisitions with public records, searching for any anomalies. That's when I found it. The properties hadn't been purchased by Mark directly, but by a shell corporation, Horizon Ventures LLC. What caught my eye was not just the LLC but the registered agent, a small, nondescript law firm in Nevada, known for its expertise in corporate anonymity. More importantly, the financing for these acquisitions had come from an offshore account, routed through a complex web of international banks. This was far beyond Mark's financial capabilities at the time, and certainly outside the scope of any legitimate, transparent dealings. A chilling thought struck me. Could Veronica have been involved even then? Her real estate background, her knowledge of corporate structures, her inherent cunning, it all fit. But if so, why would she have been helping Mark before they even reconnected after their divorce? Unless they had never truly disconnected. Unless their reunion was simply the next phase of a much longer, more elaborate scheme. The possibility sent a shiver down my spine, a cold dread that went far beyond mere betrayal. This was organized, calculated, and potentially criminal. I immediately contacted a forensic accountant recommended by David Miller, a discreet and highly skilled woman named Elena Rodriguez, specializing in complex financial investigations. I provided her with all the information I had uncovered, emphasizing my suspicions about Horizon Ventures LLC and the offshore financing. Elena, with her sharp mind and even sharper instincts, quickly confirmed my fears. "Clara," Elena said during our first detailed video call, her voice calm but serious, "what you've found is certainly suggestive. Shell corporations and offshore accounts are common tools for legitimate business, but they're also frequently used to obscure ownership and elicit financial activity. The timing, just before your marriage, and the nature of the assets involved raises significant red flags. It suggests premeditation, potentially to shield assets or establish a separate financial stream. And the fact that Veronica is in real estate and was previously married to Mark, it's a very concerning pattern." Elena's investigation began in earnest. Weeks turned into a nail-biting waiting game. I continued with my architectural projects, immersing myself in design, but the background hum of anxiety intensified with each passing day. The Architectural Digest International feature was released, garnering immense praise and solidifying my professional standing. The irony of my public triumph juxtaposed against my private battle against a hidden conspiracy was almost unbearable. Then, the call from Elena came, late one evening. Her voice was taut with urgency. "Clara, I found it, and it's worse than we thought." My heart leaped into my throat. "What is it, Elena?" "Horizon Ventures LLC," she explained, her words precise and measured, "was indeed set up by Mark, but with substantial financial backing from an undisclosed third party. I've traced the funds. They originated from an investment group based in the Cayman Islands, but the true beneficial owner is Veronica's family trust, specifically her late father's estate." A gasp escaped me. Veronica's family? But why? And why before our marriage? "That's the kicker," Elena continued, the gravity of her discovery evident in her tone. "It wasn't just a business investment, Clara. It was a calculated maneuver. The properties acquired by Horizon Ventures LLC were specifically chosen for their strategic location, adjacent to and eventually bordering the very plot of land where your current home now stands. The original plan wasn't just for Mark to make a name for himself. It was about assembling a larger, contiguous parcel of prime coastal real estate. Your house, Clara, was always intended to be the final piece of their puzzle." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about my current home, or the guest house, or even the adjacent land I had recently bought. It was about all of it. My entire property, my entire life as I knew it, was part of a grander, long-con scheme initiated years ago. The loophole Veronica had hinted at wasn't about the divorce settlement. It was about the very legitimacy of my ownership, or rather, their perceived claim to it. They had been playing a long game, long before I even met Mark, or at least, before I became privy to the extent of their joint machinations. Veronica hadn't just reconnected with Mark. She had been pulling the strings, directing his financial acquisitions, using him as a pawn to consolidate a vast coastal property empire, with my home at its very heart. They've been planning this for years, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, since before Mark and I even got married. Potentially, Elena confirmed. The trail suggests a methodical acquisition strategy. They bought up surrounding parcels, waiting for the opportune moment, perhaps for property values to rise, or for the zoning to change, or for you to come into the picture. Mark was clearly the front man, but the money, the true ownership, flowed back to Veronica's family. And the loophole she mentioned? It might revolve around the original agreements for Horizon Ventures, or some obscure clause related to future development rights tied to those surrounding parcels. That could give them a legal basis to dispute your ownership of the main house, if they could prove a pre-existing claim or joint venture. The true depth of their deception, the sheer scale of their long-term conniving, was breathtaking. It wasn't just about a failed marriage. It was about a calculated, years-long plot to acquire my home and the surrounding land. My home wasn't just a house. It was a target, a valuable asset in their grand scheme. The ghost in the machine was not a single, isolated act of betrayal, but a complex, premeditated web of deceit, stretching back into my own past, predating my blissful ignorance. The revelation had come, and it was far more chilling than I could have ever imagined. My home was indeed part of a larger plan, and I, Clara Reynolds, was now fully aware of the insidious game they had been playing. The gloves were officially off. Elena Rodriguez's revelation about Horizon Ventures LLC and Veronica's family trust sent shockwaves through me. The meticulously crafted piece I had fought so hard to achieve crumbled under the weight of this new, terrifying truth. It wasn't just a marriage that had been a lie. A significant portion of my adult life, the very foundation of my home, had been built on a deceit orchestrated years before I even suspected. The thought that Mark, the man I had loved and married, had been a willing participant, or perhaps a manipulated pawn in such a grand scheme, churned my stomach. And Veronica, with her carefully constructed facade of innocence, emerged as the true architect of this years-long plot. I scheduled an immediate, in-person meeting with David Miller, providing him with Elena's preliminary findings, along with all the supporting documents Elena had managed to unearth: corporate registrations, offshore transaction records, and intricate trust documents. David, usually unflappable, listened with a growing look of grim concern on his face, occasionally interjecting with sharp, insightful questions. "This is extraordinary, Clara," he finally said, leaning back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the ceiling as if piecing together a complex puzzle. A long con play. Veronica's family trust backing Mark's early acquisitions, specifically targeting properties around what would eventually become your home. This implies a pre-existing, sophisticated strategy. They weren't just trying to get the house back. They were executing an elaborate plan for larger land consolidation. Your home was the linchpin, the final piece in their puzzle. But why? I asked, the question escaping me in a raw whisper. Why my house? Why all this elaborate deception? David turned his gaze back to me. Real estate, Clara. Prime coastal real estate in Pacific Palisades. The kind of land that appreciates exponentially. It's not just about your house. It's about the potential for massive development. Imagine consolidating all those parcels, then selling them off to a high-end developer, or building a luxury compound yourself. The profit margins would be astronomical. He paused, his expression hardening. And if they could claim some form of pre-existing interest or joint venture that predated your sole ownership of the main property, they could attempt to legally challenge your title, or at the very least force you into a massively unfavorable buyout or partnership. He laid out the legal implications. The core of their argument, if they have one, would likely hinge on challenging the premise of your sole ownership, perhaps by arguing that the funds Mark used to purchase the initial properties that eventually became the basis for your current home were somehow tied to this Horizon Ventures LLC, or that a larger master plan for the entire area existed, implicating your parcel. It's a highly aggressive, deeply complex, and ethically dubious legal strategy. It would rely on exploiting obscure property laws, or fabricating a pre-existing joint venture agreement that ties your home into their larger land acquisition. It's a classic play in high-stakes real estate, when direct acquisition isn't possible. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. It was a scheme so intricate, so meticulously planned, it bordered on criminal genius. But it also provided a perverse sense of clarity. The divorce, Veronica's brazen invasion, Mark's constant underestimation of me, it all clicked into place, not as isolated acts of betrayal, but as calculated moves in a much grander game. "So, what's our move?" I asked, my voice steady now, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. Fear had given way to a cold, burning resolve. David outlined our strategy. First, Elena will continue her forensic dive. We need to identify every single thread of their operation, every transaction, every individual involved. We'll look for any evidence of direct fraud, conspiracy, or attempts to circumvent property laws. We'll also investigate the legal standing of Horizon Ventures LLC and its connection to Veronica's family trust, specifically any agreements that might shed light on their intentions regarding your property. Second, we'll quietly secure your property's title and all associated deeds with additional layers of legal protection. We'll update property records, consult with title insurance experts, and ensure there are no vulnerabilities they could exploit. Third, we prepare for a preemptive strike. We don't wait for them to launch their loophole claim. We consolidate all this evidence, demonstrate the depth of their long-term conspiracy, and then we go on the offensive. We hit them where it hurts most: their reputation and their carefully constructed financial scheme. He continued, "We can explore several legal avenues: civil charges for fraud, conspiracy, attempted extortion, and malicious prosecution if they attempt to launch frivolous lawsuits. Given the scale and duration of their alleged scheme, we could also consider reporting this to the authorities for a full investigation. The use of shell corporations and offshore accounts, especially if tied to fraudulent intent, could attract the attention of federal agencies. The thought of exposing their intricate web of deceit, of dismantling their long-game brick by calculated brick, was daunting, yet exhilarating. This wasn't just about protecting my home anymore. It was about exposing a sophisticated criminal enterprise, about ensuring justice for years of manipulation. Over the next few weeks, Elena's work became a revelation in itself. She unearthed further damning evidence: a series of communications between Mark and a lawyer representing Veronica's family trust, dating back nearly a decade, discussing, quote, acquisition strategies for the Palisades coastline, and the integration of existing parcels. There were coded references to the target property, clearly my home. She even found drafts of a proposed joint development agreement between Horizon Ventures LLC and a phantom entity, which outlined a complex legal structure that would, in effect, allow them to claim a substantial financial interest, or even partial ownership, in my home's underlying land value if a trigger event occurred. The trigger event wasn't explicitly stated, but the context suggested something like a major renovation, a sale, or even my divorce creating a window of opportunity. It was a masterpiece of legal deception, designed to lie dormant until the opportune moment. Elena also discovered that Veronica's family trust had been quietly acquiring other distressed properties around the broader Pacific Palisades area, all through similar shell corporations, creating a vast, unspoken empire of undervalued real estate. My property, it became chillingly clear, was not an isolated target, but a strategic piece in a much larger puzzle. A cornerstone for a multi-million-dollar development that Veronica's family had been building, piece by piece for years. They weren't just after my house. They were after the potential, the enormous wealth that could be extracted from a consolidated coastal mega-property. Mark was a key, if somewhat naive, player in this larger acquisition strategy, initially lured by promises of wealth and prestige. The web of deceit was finally, fully unraveled. It stretched back years, implicating not just Mark and Veronica, but potentially members of Veronica's extended family and a network of complicit legal and financial entities. It was a scheme of staggering ambition and cynical manipulation. The rage I felt was no longer just about personal betrayal. It was about a profound violation of justice, a systematic attempt to steal under the guise of legal technicalities. I was no longer a victim. I was the keeper of a truth that could bring down an empire built on lies. The time for defense was over. It was time for a meticulously planned, devastating counterattack. Armed with Elena Rodriguez's meticulous findings, a mountain of irrefutable evidence, David Miller and I met in his polished, high-rise office overlooking the Los Angeles skyline. The atmosphere was charged, not with tension but with a quiet, focused resolve. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the stacks of binders filled with corporate filings, bank statements, and email transcripts. The tangible proof of Mark and Veronica's long con. "Clara, this is exceptional work," David began, his eyes gleaming with professional admiration as he gestured to the organized chaos of documents. "Elena has given us everything we need. This isn't just about a divorce settlement anymore. This is a clear pattern of premeditated fraud and conspiracy to acquire property through illicit means. The trigger event for their joint development agreement, if it exists, would have likely been your divorce, creating a perceived vulnerability in your title, or the moment you acquired the adjacent lot, thus completing their desired consolidation. They were waiting for their opportune moment, and Veronica's recent call was clearly an attempt to pressure you into a renegotiation, based on fabricated threats." "So what's our move?" I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the internal inferno that raged within me. The desire for justice, for exposing their elaborate treachery, was a powerful motivator. "We have several options, and we'll pursue them simultaneously," David explained, leaning forward, his fingers steepled. "First, we draft a comprehensive cease and desist letter, not just to Mark and Veronica, but to every entity involved in Horizon Ventures LLC and the related family trusts. This letter will detail precisely what we know, present excerpts of the damning evidence, and unequivocally state that any further attempts to interfere with your property, or any frivolous legal challenges to your title, will result in immediate and aggressive counter-litigation, including claims for punitive damages, legal costs, and potentially reporting them to state and federal authorities for criminal investigation." "Criminal investigation?" The words hung in the air, potent and chilling. "Yes," David confirmed, his gaze unwavering. "Fraudulent corporate structures, offshore money laundering, conspiracy to defraud. These are serious allegations. We'll make it clear that we're prepared to escalate to that level if they don't back down. This isn't about getting back what's rightfully his for Mark. It's about exposing a multi-million-dollar real estate scheme that could unravel their entire family's financial empire if mishandled. Second," he continued, "we prepare a civil lawsuit. This will be a declaratory judgment action, essentially asking the court to officially declare your ownership of the entire property, including the adjacent lot, as absolute and unencumbered, explicitly refuting any past or present claims made by Horizon Ventures LLC or Veronica's family trust. This puts them on the defensive immediately, forcing them to prove their alleged, quote, loophole in a court of law under oath, where their web of lies will quickly unravel. We'll also file for injunctive relief, preventing them from making any further claims or taking any actions against your property during the legal process. Third, and this is crucial, we don't just send letters, we ensure the right people know. I have contacts in the State Bar Association who investigate attorney misconduct. If their lawyers were complicit in this long-term scheme, they could face disbarment. More importantly, I have connections in financial regulatory bodies, and even with investigative journalists specializing in white-collar crime. We can use this information, discreetly at first, to apply public and regulatory pressure. The Architectural Digest article that just came out is perfect timing. It puts you in the spotlight, making any attack on your property highly visible and giving them a public relations nightmare. A slow smile spread across my face. "You're suggesting we throw down the gauntlet." "Precisely," David returned, a glint in his eye. "We leave them no room to maneuver, no dark corners to hide in. We take away their greatest weapon, their secrecy, and their ability to operate in the shadows. This is not just about defending your property, Clara. This is about dismantling their entire enterprise and sending a clear message: you do not mess with Clara Reynolds." The plan was audacious, aggressive, and deeply satisfying. It moved beyond simple defense into a powerful counteroffensive. This wasn't about bitterness or revenge. It was about justice, about protecting everything I had worked for and reclaiming the narrative. The following week, the meticulously prepared documents were sent. The cease and desist letters, thick with legal jargon and damning attachments, landed on the desks of Mark, Veronica, their respective attorneys, and the registered agents of Horizon Ventures LLC and Veronica's family trust. Simultaneously, the lawsuit was filed, a formal declaration of my absolute ownership, daring them to challenge it. The silence that followed was deafening, a terrifying calm before the storm. I knew they were reeling, scrambling, their carefully constructed world suddenly exposed. The phone didn't ring, no threats materialized, no desperate pleas for a private meeting. They were trapped, caught in the very web of deceit they had woven. Then, the first crack in their facade appeared. Mark's attorney, a different one this time, called David, clearly rattled. He attempted to dismiss the evidence, to paint it as misinterpretations and unfounded accusations. But David was unyielding, calmly outlining the overwhelming evidence Elena had collected. The attorney, cornered, eventually admitted to his client's oversight regarding Horizon Ventures LLC, hinting at an attempt to resolve this amicably. Amicably. The word tasted like ashes on my tongue. After years of deception, of attempting to steal my home and my future, they wanted to resolve it amicably. It was a clear sign of panic. My gaze drifted to the sprawling blueprint for the adjacent property, my next project, spread out across my studio table. This wasn't just about building a new home, it was about building a new legacy, one untainted by deceit, one forged in the fires of resilience and truth. The gauntlet had been thrown. Now it was time to watch them pick it up, or crumble under its weight. The fight for justice, it seemed, was finally reaching its dramatic climax. The gauntlet had been thrown, and for a few days the world seemed to hold its breath. The silence from Mark and Veronica's camp was a heavy, expectant blanket, broken only by the incessant hum of my own internal anxiety. David Miller, ever the strategist, advised me to brace for their inevitable counterattack, whether it be a desperate plea, a thinly veiled threat, or a frivolous motion to dismiss. He knew, and I knew, that cornered animals often lash out with unpredictable ferocity. True to form, the first tremor came not from Mark himself, but from a new legal team representing him and, surprisingly, Veronica's family trust. Their previous attorney had clearly recognized the depth of the quagmire and wisely stepped aside. The new firm, a large, aggressive Los Angeles outfit known for its scorched earth tactics, filed a flurry of motions. There was a motion to dismiss my lawsuit, claiming it was, quote, vexatious litigation and a, quote, personal vendetta. There was also a highly aggressive counterclaim, accusing me of intentional infliction of emotional distress, slander, and even attempted extortion, stemming from my supposed unfounded allegations and my attempts to malign Mark and Veronica. It was a classic deflection, designed to overwhelm us with paperwork and shift the narrative, painting me as the aggressor. As expected, David said, his voice calm, almost amused, as he reviewed the stacks of new filings in his office. They're attempting to bury us in motions and intimidate us with counterclaims. But these are baseless. They have no merit. He pointed to a paragraph in their counterclaim. They're trying to leverage your public profile from the Architectural Digest article, claiming you're using it to discredit them. This is precisely why we're going to use that article to our advantage. Our response was swift and surgical. David filed comprehensive rebuttals to their motions to dismiss, methodically dissecting their arguments and buttressing our claims with further excerpts from Elena's extensive documentation. He also filed a motion for summary judgment on their counterclaim, arguing that their claims were so devoid of factual basis they should be dismissed before even reaching discovery. It was a bold move, designed to signal our unwavering confidence. Beyond the legal chess match, David and I had a more subtle strategy in play: controlled dissemination of information. The Architectural Digest International article had indeed put me on a global stage, highlighting my talent, my resilience, and my story of building a life from the ground up. This public narrative, of a strong, independent woman triumphing over adversity, made Mark and Veronica's alleged machinations all the more egregious by contrast. David had a trusted contact, a seasoned investigative journalist at a prominent national newspaper, who had been following my story with interest. We provided this journalist with a carefully curated, anonymous tip-off about the unfolding legal drama involving a prominent architect and, quote, allegations of a decades-long real estate conspiracy. No names were mentioned, but enough breadcrumbs were left to pique their interest and begin their own parallel investigation. The goal wasn't a full-blown media circus yet, but a steady drip of credible information that would quietly apply pressure, making their aggressive counterclaims seem more desperate than strong. The first hint of this public pressure came in the form of a small, discreet article in a regional real estate trade publication. It didn't name names, but it discussed, quote, unusual patterns of land acquisition in prime coastal areas, often involving complex shell corporations and foreign trusts. It also mentioned, quote, potential legal challenges to established property titles. It was a subtle, yet powerful signal that their hidden game was no longer quite so hidden. I imagined Mark and Veronica poring over the article, their faces paling as they recognized the thinly veiled references to their operations. The echo chamber of their desperation was beginning to amplify. Boss Boo. In my own life, the intensity of the legal battle, while draining, also served as a strange kind of focus. The initial emotional turbulence had given way to a steely resolve. I continued to pour my energy into my architectural projects, particularly the large Malibu estate and the nascent plans for the community garden. These creative endeavors served as anchors, grounding me in purpose and progress. I found a deep satisfaction in building, in creating something tangible and beautiful, in stark contrast to the destructive, manipulative schemes of Mark and Veronica. My sessions with my therapist, Dr. Eris, became invaluable. She helped me navigate the complex emotions, acknowledging the anger and hurt, but always guiding me back to a place of strength and empowerment. They want to destabilize you, Clara, she had said during one session. They want you to react emotionally, to make mistakes. Your greatest strength right now is your quiet power, your strategic mind. Every time you channel your energy into your work, every time you let David handle the legal battles without letting them consume you, you win. You are building your future, not fighting their past. Her words resonated deeply, reinforcing my commitment to control the narrative of my own life, not letting them define it. Meanwhile, Elena continued her relentless pursuit of the truth. She was now digging deeper into the financial records of Veronica's family trust itself, beyond Horizon Ventures LLC. Her goal was to trace the source of their wealth, to understand the true extent of their real estate holdings, and to uncover any other vulnerabilities they might possess. If this is part of a larger pattern, Elena explained during one of our calls, there might be other questionable dealings, other properties they've acquired through similar, ethically ambiguous means. Exposing that could be devastating for them. The legal filings continued to volley back and forth, a relentless exchange of legal arguments and counter-arguments. Mark and Veronica's team seemed intent on delaying, on dragging out the process. Hoping to exhaust my resources or my resolve, they filed multiple requests for extensions, motions for protective orders to shield certain documents, and even attempts to have the case moved to a different jurisdiction, claiming bias. Each maneuver was met with a swift, decisive counter by David. He was a master of legal chess, anticipating their moves, blocking their attempts, and always pressing forward. I understood then that this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a war of attrition. But I had more than just legal firepower. I had a deeper well of truth and a clearer vision of the future I was fighting for. The peace I had initially sought was now tempered with a quiet ferocity. I would not just defend my home, I would expose their entire house of cards. The echo chamber of their desperation was about to burst. The legal skirmishes intensified, becoming a relentless grind of motions, filings, and counterfilings. Mark and Veronica's legal team, still clinging to their strategy of delay and deflection, pushed for a series of depositions. This was their opportunity to put me on the stand, under oath, and attempt to dismantle my credibility, to portray me as a bitter ex-wife consumed by spite. It was also our opportunity to put them under the same scrutiny. My own deposition was grueling. Their lawyers, two sharp-suited, aggressive litigators, hammered me with questions, probing every detail of my marriage, my knowledge of Mark's finances, my relationship with Veronica, and even my current mental state. They tried to bait me, to provoke an emotional outburst, but I remained steadfast, calm, and truthful. I answered every question with precision, relying on the facts, the timelines, and the meticulously documented evidence Elena had provided. I reiterated the timeline of Mark and Veronica's affair, the discovery of their emails, and the immediate impact on my marriage. When they tried to suggest my accusations were a conspiracy theory, I simply referred them to the detailed forensic report, the corporate filings, and the bank statements. My composure, coupled with the undeniable weight of the evidence, frustrated them visibly. David Miller sat beside me, a silent, reassuring presence, occasionally interjecting with an objection that protected me from truly egregious lines of questioning. The hours stretched on, but by the end, I felt an unexpected sense of empowerment. I had faced them directly, under their chosen conditions, and I had not wavered. Then came the depositions of Mark and Veronica. These were the moments we had truly been waiting for. David, with Elena's comprehensive financial trail in hand, systematically dissected their testimonies. Mark went first. He entered the room with a forced air of confidence that quickly evaporated under David's relentless questioning. David pressed him on the origins of Horizon Ventures LLC, the source of its funding, and the true beneficial owners. Mark stammered, contradicted himself, and resorted to vague explanations about complex investment structures and business opportunities that he claimed he too, didn't fully understand. He tried to pin the blame on Veronica, claiming she had been the one with the, connections and the financial expertise, and that he had merely followed her lead in good faith. It was a desperate attempt to portray himself as a hapless victim, rather than a willing participant. "Mr. Reynolds?" David's voice was calm, but edged with steel. "You signed documents. You were the registered agent for a period. You engaged in multiple property transactions. Are you telling this court that you, a seasoned real estate developer, had no understanding of the financial flows or ownership structures of a company you were intimately involved with, a company that acquired parcels directly adjacent to your marital home?" Mark squirmed, beads of sweat forming on his brow. He looked pathetic, stripped of his usual charisma, his carefully constructed image crumbling under the weight of the truth. He could deny, but he couldn't explain away the paper trail. Veronica's deposition was a different beast entirely. She was sharper, more cunning, and initially more composed. She tried to deflect, to charm, to manipulate. She denied any long-term conspiracy, claiming her family's trust had simply made a, routine investment in Mark's early ventures, and that her moving into the guest house was purely out of compassion for a friend in need during a difficult time. She painted herself as a benevolent figure, a victim of my vindictive nature, but David was prepared. He had Elena's detailed analysis of the subtle yet clear communication between Veronica and the trust's legal team, explicitly discussing the comprehensive Palisades strategy. He had emails from Veronica to Mark, years ago, detailing specific target properties, including mine. He had the drafted joint development agreement with the ominous trigger event clauses. "Ms. Thorne," David began, holding up a copy of one of these emails, "can you explain why, in this email dated 5 years ago addressed to Mr. Reynolds, you specifically discuss securing the central parcel with a detailed map clearly outlining my client's current home?" Veronica's practiced smile faltered. Her eyes darted to her attorney, who looked visibly uncomfortable. That's taken out of context," she sputtered. "It was merely a hypothetical discussion about potential future opportunities." "Hypothetical?" David pressed, his voice rising slightly. "And what about this draft agreement, found among your family trust's internal documents, outlining a, joint development on the very land my client occupies, contingent on certain restructuring events? Is that hypothetical too, Ms. Thorne? Or is that the blueprint for your long game?" The color drained from Veronica's face. The cool, calculating facade finally cracked. She became agitated, defensive, and eventually, verbally aggressive, accusing David of harassment and misrepresentation. Her composure shattered, revealing the true malice beneath. This emotional outburst was exactly what David wanted. It revealed her true nature, proving she was not the benevolent figure she claimed to be. Her testimony was a tangled mess of half-truths and furious denials, utterly demolishing her credibility. Beyond the courtroom, the controlled leaks to the investigative journalist began to bear fruit. The The regional real estate piece was followed by a more pointed article in a respected national business publication, discussing the dark underbelly of high-stakes real estate speculation, and detailing a specific case, again without naming names but leaving little doubt as to who, where a, quote, prominent family trust was allegedly engaged in a, quote, decades-long scheme to consolidate prime coastal land through shell corporations and manipulated acquisitions. The article referenced ongoing legal battles and hinted at potential federal investigations. The public pressure began to mount. While my Architectural Digest feature continued to elevate my professional standing, the shadowy allegations against Mark and Veronica's circles started to cast a pall over their own reputations. Business partners, wary of association with potential fraud and scandal, began to distance themselves. Investment opportunities dried up. Their carefully constructed network began to fray. The shifting sands beneath their feet were now openly eroding. They were no longer just facing a civil lawsuit. They were facing public scrutiny and the looming specter of a much larger downfall. The silence I had experienced from them earlier had not been a sign of surrender, but a desperate attempt to regroup. Now they were on the ropes, and the next few rounds would be decisive. The walls were closing in. Mark and Veronica's depositions had been disastrous for their case, revealing their evasiveness and, in Veronica's case, her barely concealed malice. The growing public scrutiny, fueled by the discreet yet impactful media reports, began to chip away at their professional and social standing. Business associates shied away, deals evaporated, and the once unshakable facade of Veronica's family trust began to show cracks. Elena Rodriguez continued to dig, unearthing more connections, more questionable transactions, hinting at an even broader network of illicit dealings that could implicate others. The pressure was becoming unbearable for them. Then, a surprising development. David Miller received a phone call from a new attorney representing Mark, distinct from the aggressive firm handling the joint defense with Veronica's family trust. This new attorney was a quiet, unassuming man, not known for high-profile litigation but for his discretion and his focus on damage control and negotiation. He requested a private, off-the-record meeting with David, specifically without Veronica's legal representation present. "Mark wants to talk," David informed me, his voice carefully neutral. "He wants to discuss a separate resolution, distinct from Veronica. It seems the pressure is getting to him, and he's feeling abandoned by her family's legal team, who are clearly prioritizing the trust's reputation over his personal well-being." A flicker of something akin to pity quickly extinguished passed through me. Mark, always the weaker link, the one more susceptible to external pressures, was cracking. "What does he want?" I asked, my voice flat. "He wants to cut a deal," David stated. "He's offering to provide more information, to confirm certain aspects of their scheme, in exchange for a more lenient outcome for himself. He's clearly terrified of facing potential criminal charges or of being financially ruined by the civil lawsuit. He wants to save himself." The temptation to leverage Mark's weakness was immense. His testimony could be the final nail in Veronica's coffin, providing the insider details we needed to expose the full extent of the Strauss conspiracy. But a cold, calculating part of me also recognized the risk. Mark was a liar, a manipulator. Could he be trusted, even in desperation? "We listen," I decided after a moment of deliberation. "But we offer nothing until he delivers verifiable, substantial information. And any agreement must be contingent on his full cooperation against Veronica and her family's trust. No leniency without full disclosure." David met with Mark's new attorney. The meeting was brief, but impactful. Mark, through his lawyer, indicated his willingness to provide sworn testimony detailing Veronica's precise role in orchestrating Horizon Ventures LLC, her family's financial backing, and the long-term plan to acquire my property. He would also corroborate the timeline of their affair and its connection to the trigger event for their larger scheme. In exchange, he sought protection from criminal prosecution and a significantly reduced financial obligation in our civil suit, arguing his role was that of a misled participant rather than the primary architect. "He's offering a full confession, essentially," David summarized. He's throwing Veronica under the bus. This could be the breaking point for their entire defense. The following week, in a highly secured and private setting, Mark provided his sworn confession. He looked haggard, his eyes hollow, a stark contrast to the confident, charming man I had once married. He recounted the story, not as a defiant denial, but as a remorseful, if self-serving tale of manipulation. He admitted that Veronica had approached him years ago, before our marriage, with the idea of a, quote, joint real estate venture, backed by her family's trust. He confirmed that the initial acquisitions around my property were part of a long-term strategy to consolidate a prime coastal development site. He revealed that Veronica had always seen my house as the final piece of their puzzle, and that her moving into the guest house had been a calculated move to assess the property, to gain information, and to identify potential vulnerabilities in my ownership. He confessed to receiving significant financial incentives from Veronica's family trust for his participation, confirming that he was indeed a paid frontman, albeit a willing one, in their intricate scheme. His testimony painted a damning picture of Veronica as the mastermind, a cold, calculating strategist driven by greed and a desire to expand her family's already considerable wealth. He confirmed that the loophole she had threatened me with was a fabricated legal theory based on their alleged pre-existing claims through Horizon Ventures, a theory that he now admitted was entirely specious and designed purely for intimidation. His confession was a raw, unvarnished look into the depths of their deception, corroborating every piece of evidence Alina had meticulously uncovered. The weight of Mark's confession, combined with Elena's forensic report and our robust legal filings, put Veronica and her family's trust in an impossible position. Their legal team, facing undeniable proof of a systematic fraud and the imminent threat of federal investigation and public humiliation, recognized the game was over. The media too picked up the scent. The investigative journalist, now armed with irrefutable named sources, published a scathing exposé detailing the, quote, decades-long real estate conspiracy, and explicitly naming Veronica Thorne and I, her family's trust, painting a picture of corporate avarice and ruthless manipulation. The article caused a firestorm, igniting public outrage and leading to a cascade of negative publicity that threatened to unravel not just their current legal battles, but their entire business empire. A final, tense mediation was called. Veronica, flanked by her now visibly stressed legal team, sat across from me and David. She looked pale, her usual poise replaced by a brittle fury, her eyes darting nervously between the documents and my unflinching gaze. She no longer had the upper hand, no longer held any secrets. Her long game had been exposed, dismantled by the very man she had manipulated. David presented our ultimatum: a full and complete surrender of any and all claims to my property, a public acknowledgement of my sole and legitimate ownership, a substantial financial settlement to cover all legal costs and damages, and a commitment from Veronica and her family trust to cease and desist from any future contact or interference. Failure to agree would result in the immediate escalation of our lawsuit to include every possible criminal charge, full public disclosure of all their fraudulent dealings, and a relentless pursuit of their entire financial network. The silence in the room was palpable, thick with the weight of defeat. Veronica's attorney, after a whispered, urgent consultation with her, slowly nodded. The jig was up. The breaking point had arrived. The battle for my home, for my life, was finally over. The air in the mediation room was thick with the weight of defeat, palpable on Veronica's side of the table. Her face, usually so composed and cunning, was a mask of pale fury and barely contained desperation. Her legal team, chastened and clearly recognizing the futility of further resistance, had quietly agreed to David Miller's terms. The silence that followed her attorney's concession was not the anxious quiet of earlier days, but the deep, resonant calm of absolute victory. My heart, which had pounded through so many moments of fear and uncertainty, now beat with a steady, triumphant rhythm. The formalization of the settlement happened swiftly in the days that followed. Veronica and her family trust, under intense legal and public pressure, capitulated entirely. They signed documents unequivocally relinquishing any and all historical or future claims to my Pacific Palisades property, including the adjacent land. The Joint Development Agreement and Horizon Ventures LLC were formally dissolved, with all lingering assets and claims transferred to the trust, which then, under court order, formally acknowledged my sole, unencumbered ownership of the entire parcel. They also paid a substantial financial settlement to cover all my legal fees, the costs of Elena's forensic investigation, and a significant amount for damages for malicious prosecution and the emotional distress their long-term scheme had caused. The figure was astronomical, a clear reflection of their desperation to avoid a full-blown federal investigation and the complete collapse of their reputation. It was more than just money. It was an admission of guilt, a tangible surrender. Mark, through his new attorney, also formalized his separate agreement. His confession, legally recorded and filed, was a devastating blow to Veronica's original defense. In exchange for his cooperation, he received a more lenient outcome in our civil suit, primarily focused on restitution for the emotional toll and financial deceit. But he still faced significant personal financial penalties and the complete unraveling of his professional credibility. He was effectively ostracized from the high-stakes real estate world he had once coveted, his name irrevocably linked to fraud and conspiracy. The public fallout was swift and brutal. The national newspaper, having closely followed the story, published a follow-up article that went beyond hints and innuendos. It openly named Veronica Thorne and her family's trust, detailing the multi-decade scheme to acquire prime coastal land through shell corporations, offshore financing, and fraudulent claims. Mark Reynolds was also named, portrayed as a willing accomplice who eventually cracked under pressure. The article painted a damning picture of corporate avarice and ruthless manipulation, showcasing the intricate web of deceit Elena had unraveled. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. Social media exploded with outrage, comment sections filled with condemnation. The repercussions for Veronica and her family's trust were immediate and severe. Their meticulously cultivated reputation as shrewd, ethical investors crumbled overnight. Projects they had underway were suddenly put on hold as partners pulled out, banks reviewed their loans, and investors fled. Regulatory bodies, prompted by the media exposure and our legal filings, launched their own investigations into their financial dealings, not just in California but across their broader national and international portfolios. The family's once unassailable empire began to shake, its foundations built on deception now exposed to the light. It wasn't just my property they had lost, it was the trust and credibility that underpinned their entire business. For Mark, the consequences were equally dire, albeit on a smaller, more personal scale. His remaining clients abandoned him. His attempts to launch new ventures were met with cold refusals. He became a pariah in the very circles he had once desperately tried to impress. The public narrative shifted from his initial portrayal as a charismatic, successful developer to a manipulative, self-serving betrayer. His name became synonymous with scandal, a cautionary tale whispered among industry insiders. He had sought wealth and prestige, but instead, he had earned a lifetime of public humiliation and professional ruin. For me, the immediate sensation was one of profound, exhilarating relief. The incessant hum of anxiety that had lived in my periphery for so long finally vanished. It was replaced by a vast, liberating silence. I felt lighter, unburdened, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The process had been grueling, emotionally exhausting, but the victory was complete, undeniable, and deeply satisfying. David Miller called me a few days after the final papers were signed. "It's done, Clara," he said, his voice imbued with a quiet pride. "They're out, completely, and their world is crumbling around them. You won." I walked out onto the balcony of my studio, the former guest house that had once symbolized their invasion, and now stood as a testament to my resilience. The Pacific stretched out before me, vast and unchanging, reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. My home, bathed in the soft evening light, felt truly mine for the first time in years. Every corner, every stone, every view was now entirely unburdened by the shadows of their deceit. The emotional and practical relief was immense. I found myself sleeping soundly through the night, waking up without the familiar knot of dread in my stomach. My focus in work became sharper, my creativity unhindered. I no longer had to look over my shoulder, no longer had to anticipate the next attack. The freedom was intoxicating. My next step was symbolic, yet deeply personal. I officially commissioned a local artist to create a large, striking sculpture for the entrance of my property. It would be a piece that symbolized strength, resilience, and growth. A phoenix rising from flames, perhaps, or a majestic tree with deep, unshakable roots. This wasn't just landscaping. It was a permanent marker, a public declaration of my reclaiming of this sacred space, a monument to the battle I had won. The silence that now permeated my life was not empty. It was the quiet, exhilarating hum of triumph. With the legal battles definitively concluded and the public narrative shifting dramatically in my favor, a new chapter of my life began to unfold with astonishing speed and clarity. The initial relief gave way to an invigorating sense of boundless possibility. The fear was gone, replaced by a fierce, joyful determination to build, to create, to fully inhabit the future I had fought so hard to secure. My professional life exploded. The Architectural Digest International feature, initially published amidst the legal skirmishes, gained even more traction after the full story of the Thorne-Reynolds conspiracy broke. I was no longer just a talented architect. I was a symbol of resilience, a woman who had faced betrayal on an epic scale and emerged victorious. My firm, Clara Reynolds Designs, was inundated with inquiries. High-profile clients, drawn not only by my cutting-edge designs, but also by my compelling personal story, sought my expertise for ambitious projects across the country. I became a sought-after speaker at industry conferences, sharing my insights on sustainable design, but often, subtly, weaving in themes of integrity, perseverance, and the importance of solid foundations, both in architecture and in life. The adjacent property, the one that had been a silent focal point of Mark and Veronica's long con, now became the centerpiece of my most ambitious personal project. I named it the Resilience Estate. My vision for it was grand. Not just a larger home for myself, but a sprawling, integrated complex that embodied sustainable luxury living, a showcase for my architectural philosophy. It would feature energy-efficient designs, reclaimed materials, extensive native landscaping, and smart home technology seamlessly integrated into the natural environment. The new studio would expand, incorporating a dedicated workshop for material prototyping and a gallery space to host industry events and local art exhibitions. The community garden project, initially a side passion, now gained significant momentum. I allocated a portion of the Resilience Estate's initial development profits to fund its launch, partnering with local nonprofits and dedicating my own design expertise to create a vibrant, self-sustaining urban oasis in a disadvantaged neighborhood. This garden was more than just a place to grow food. It was a tangible symbol of growth, nourishment, and community building, a direct antidote to the destructive nature of the scheme I had just overcome. My personal transformation deepened. The experience had stripped away any lingering insecurities, any need for external validation. I learned to trust my instincts implicitly. My relationship with my sister, Sarah, continued to be a bedrock of support, her unwavering love a constant source of comfort and strength. Liam, my colleague, became an even closer friend. Our shared passion for design evolved into a comfortable, easy companionship. We often brainstormed new ideas for projects, challenging each other's perspectives and celebrating each other's successes. He admired my strength, and I appreciated his quiet wisdom and unwavering loyalty. There was a profound contentment in these genuine connections, relationships built on shared values and mutual respect, entirely free from the shadows of manipulation. I also began to explore interests beyond architecture. I resumed my passion for ocean kayaking, finding solace and clarity in the vast expanse of the Pacific. The rhythmic stroke of the paddle, the salty spray on my face, the quiet solitude of the open water. It was a profound meditative practice that cleansed my mind and recharged my spirit. I took up abstract painting, channeling raw emotions onto canvas, finding a new outlet for expression that was both liberating and deeply personal. My life, once seemingly defined by a marriage and then by a battle, was now expanding into a rich tapestry of experiences, passions, and authentic connections. Elena Rodriguez, the forensic accountant, became not just a professional contact but a trusted confidant. Her sharp mind and ethical compass deeply impressed me, and I often consulted her on various aspects of my expanding business, knowing she possessed an unparalleled ability to discern truth from deception. David Miller, my formidable attorney, remained a pillar of strength and wise counsel. We developed a strong professional bond, built on mutual respect and the shared experience of dismantling a sophisticated criminal enterprise. I often joked that he was now my architect of legal foundations, ensuring every new venture was built on unassailable ground. One evening, as I stood on the newly expanded footprint of the Resilience Estate, overseeing the initial groundbreaking, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The construction hummed with the promise of new beginnings. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, highlighting the nascent forms of what would become my magnum opus. This wasn't just a physical structure, it was a symbol of my rebirth. The scars of betrayal remained, but they were now merely reminders of the strength I had discovered within myself. I had faced the darkness, unmasked the deception, and emerged not only intact but stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself than ever before. The future, once a source of anxiety, now stretched before me, an open horizon brimming with exhilarating possibilities. I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had built, what I had reclaimed, and what I was still becoming. The construction of the Resilience Estate proceeded with remarkable speed, mirroring the accelerated pace of my own life. Each beam raised, each wall erected, felt like a deliberate act of creation, a defiant answer to the forces that had sought to dismantle my world. The community garden project also broke ground, transforming a derelict urban lot into a vibrant green space, tended by eager community volunteers and brimming with the promise of fresh produce and shared purpose. My days were a whirlwind of blueprints, site visits, client meetings, and the joyous chaos of building something truly meaningful. News of Mark and Veronica, though no longer a direct threat, occasionally filtered through the periphery of my life, serving as stark reminders of the consequences of their actions. Veronica's family trust, once seemingly invincible, faced an onslaught of legal challenges and regulatory investigations. The national exposé had opened a Pandora's box of scrutiny, leading to a cascade of lawsuits from aggrieved investors and former partners, who now felt emboldened to come forward with their own stories of questionable dealings. Their vast real estate portfolio, built on a foundation of ethical ambiguity, began to unravel under the relentless pressure. Properties were seized, assets frozen, and their reputation was irrevocably tarnished. Veronica, once a calculating puppet master, was reportedly facing not just civil ruin, but the very real threat of criminal indictments for fraud and money laundering. Her cunning had ultimately led to her own spectacular downfall, her long game collapsing under the weight of its own deception. Mark, having confessed and cooperated, faced a different, though equally devastating fate. While he avoided the most severe criminal charges, his name was irrevocably linked to the scandal. He lost all his remaining business connections and was effectively blacklisted from the real estate industry. He became a cautionary tale, a pariah in the very circles he had once desperately sought to impress. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had left California, unable to escape the lingering whispers and the public shame, fading into obscurity, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. His quest for his legacy had led to nothing but professional oblivion and personal disgrace. These updates, though significant, no longer held the power to wound or disturb me. They were merely the final echoes of a battle long since won, objective confirmations that justice, in its own complex way, had been served. My focus was entirely on the vibrant present and the exhilarating future. The Resilience Estate was completed with remarkable speed, a testament to my team's dedication and my own unwavering vision. It stood as a masterpiece of modern sustainable architecture, seamlessly blending into the Pacific Palisades landscape, a harmonious blend of innovative design and environmental responsibility. The expansive studio, filled with natural light, hummed with creativity, a sanctuary where I could continue to push the boundaries of my craft. The central living spaces were designed for comfort, for peace, for true home. The sculpture I commissioned for the entrance, a magnificent, abstract representation of rising waves, became a landmark, recognized by locals and visitors alike. The opening of the Resilience Estate was a quiet, intimate affair, attended by close friends and trusted colleagues, Sarah, Liam, Elena, David, and a few select clients who had stood by me. There was no grand public fanfare, no media circus. The true triumph was not for public consumption, but for personal validation. As I walked through the sun-drenched rooms, observing the play of light and shadow, feeling the sturdy foundation beneath my feet, I felt a profound sense of ownership, not just of the physical structure, but of my entire life. Months later, the community garden flourished, a testament to the power of shared vision and collective effort. Children laughed among the rows of vegetables, neighbors connected over gardening tips, and the previously barren lot bloomed with life. It was a stark, beautiful contrast to the sterile calculations of the Thorne-Reynolds conspiracy, a powerful reminder that true value lay not in manipulation and acquisition, but in creation and connection. My career continued its upward trajectory. I received prestigious awards not just for my designs, but for my commitment to ethical practice and community engagement. My name became synonymous with integrity in an industry often plagued by cutthroat ambition. I found myself traveling more, consulting on global sustainability projects, and mentoring young architects, particularly women, inspiring them to pursue their visions with unwavering determination. One quiet evening, sitting on the patio of the Resilience Estate, watching the moon cast a silver path across the Pacific, I reflected on the journey. The pain of betrayal had been deep, the battle for my home grueling. But from the ashes of that deceit, I had forged a life of extraordinary purpose and profound authenticity. I was no longer defined by the man I had married, or by the woman who had tried to steal my home. I was Clara Reynolds, an architect who built not just structures, but legacies. My life was a testament to resilience, a beacon of what could be reclaimed and redefined after profound loss. The victory was complete, the lessons learned, and the future limitless. The completion of the Resilience Estate marked a pivotal moment not just in my career, but in the narrative of my life. It stood as a magnificent, tangible monument to strength and renewed purpose, a testament to what could be forged from the crucible of adversity. The meticulous attention to detail, the innovative use of sustainable materials, and the seamless integration with the natural environment garnered widespread acclaim within the architectural community. It became a flagship project, drawing industry leaders, environmentalists, and aspiring designers from around the globe to study its principles and admire its beauty. This recognition elevated my firm, Clara Reynolds Designs, to an unprecedented level of prestige and influence. My calendar filled with requests for speaking engagements at prestigious universities and international conferences. I often shared the story of the Resilience Estate, not as a tale of personal grievance, but as a case study in resilience, design integrity, and the power of ethical building. I spoke about the importance of constructing strong foundations, both literally in architecture and metaphorically in life and relationships. My message resonated deeply, particularly with young women in male-dominated fields, who saw in my journey a powerful example of perseverance and self-empowerment. Mentoring became an increasingly important part of my life. I established a scholarship program at my alma mater for aspiring female architects, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, believing firmly in opening doors and nurturing talent that might otherwise go unnoticed. The community garden, the green oasis, flourished beyond my wildest expectations. It became a vibrant hub of activity, a place where people of all ages and backgrounds came together to cultivate not just food, but a sense of shared community. I continue to devote my time and resources to its expansion, working with local artists to incorporate murals, building an mares, educational pavilion for workshops, and even launching a farmers market that provided fresh produce to the neighborhood while empowering local residents. The transformation of that blighted lot into a thriving, verdant space became a beacon of hope and a powerful symbol of positive change. It was a tangible contrast to the destructive, acquisitive nature of the scheme I had overcome. Here, value was created through collaboration and genuine contribution, rather than deceit and manipulation. My life was no longer about reacting to threats, but about proactively building a future filled with meaning and impact. The financial settlement from Veronica's family trust, coupled with the exponential growth of my business, provided me with unparalleled freedom. I invested wisely, ensuring the long-term stability of my firm and securing a legacy that went far beyond personal wealth. I created a foundation dedicated to sustainable urban development, focusing on projects that uplifted communities and promoted environmental stewardship. This philanthropic venture allowed me to leverage my architectural expertise and resources for the greater good, channeling my passion for design into large-scale societal impact. Liam remained a steadfast friend and professional collaborator. We embarked on a joint venture, designing a series of eco-friendly, affordable housing complexes that aimed to revolutionize urban living. Our shared vision and complementary skill sets proved to be a formidable combination, and our projects quickly gained national attention. His quiet support and intellectual camaraderie were a constant source of joy and intellectual stimulation, reminding me that genuine, non-romantic connections could be just as profound and enriching. Sarah, my sister, continued to be my closest confidant, celebrating my triumphs and offering unwavering love. Our bond, forged in the fires of shared experience, was unbreakable, a constant reminder of the enduring power of family. Occasionally, I would hear whispers about Veronica and Mark, the Thorne family trust, stripped bare by ongoing investigations and relentless legal battles, was reportedly in tatters, a shadow of its former self. Veronica herself, facing a multitude of civil and criminal charges, was a pariah, stripped of her influence and her carefully constructed image. Mark had indeed vanished from the public eye, his name forever synonymous with betrayal. These were not moments of gloating, but rather quiet acknowledgments that the scales had balanced, that justice, however slow and arduous, had ultimately prevailed. Their grand scheme, designed to consolidate wealth and power through deceit, had instead led to their utter ruin, while my life, built on integrity and resilience, flourished. I had arrived at a place where my past no longer defined me, but informed me. The wounds had healed, leaving behind scars that served not as reminders of pain, but as symbols of strength. Every line I drew, every building I conceived, every community initiative I supported, was infused with a deeper purpose, a quiet determination to build a world fundamentally different from the one I had almost lost. I was the architect of my own destiny, and the horizons stretching before me were vast, beautiful, and utterly my own. Years passed, marked by the rising sun over the Pacific and the tangible growth of the legacy I was meticulously crafting. The Resilience Estate, my architectural magnum opus, had been featured in countless publications, becoming a benchmark for sustainable luxury design worldwide. It stood not just as a home, but as a living testament to transformation, a beacon of hope for those who believed in building back stronger, wiser, and more authentically. Its grounds, once a silent battleground of unseen intent, now teemed with life, both natural and human. The sculpture at its entrance, the abstract waves eternally reaching, symbolized the unyielding spirit of the ocean and the indomitable will that had carried me through the storm. My firm, Clara Reynolds Designs, was now a global powerhouse, renowned for its innovative, environmentally conscious projects that blended cutting-edge technology with timeless aesthetics. We designed cityscapes that breathed, schools that inspired, and communities that thrived. I traveled extensively, not out of obligation, but out of genuine passion, collaborating with international teams on projects that sought to redefine urban living in harmony with nature. My role had evolved beyond just design. I was a thought leader, an advocate for ethical practice, and a champion for positive change within an industry that often prioritized profit over people and planet. My voice carried weight, my vision sparked inspiration, and my name evoked respect. The scholarship program for aspiring female architects had flourished, empowering a new generation of talent who brought fresh perspectives and unwavering dedication to the field. Many of my mentees had gone on to establish their own successful practices, a ripple effect of the initial opportunity I had provided. The Green Oasis, the community garden, was now a thriving example of urban renewal, a model replicated in cities across the nation. It continued to nourish both bodies and souls, a verdant testament to the power of shared vision and collective endeavor. The foundation I established, dedicated to sustainable urban development, funded groundbreaking research, and launched transformative projects that directly addressed environmental challenges and fostered equitable growth in underserved communities. My life, once seemingly confined to the boundaries of a personal struggle, had expanded exponentially, becoming a force for significant, tangible good in the world. My personal relationships, too, deepened with time. Sarah remained my unwavering anchor, her unwavering love a constant source of strength. We shared laughter, quiet evenings, and the profound comfort of a bond that had weathered every storm. Liam, my esteemed colleague and dear friend, continued to be a vital presence in my professional and personal life. Our joint ventures in eco-friendly housing gained significant traction, revolutionizing the approach to affordable, sustainable living. Our friendship, built on mutual respect and shared passion, was a quiet, enduring joy, a testament to the richness of platonic connections. There were no more echoes of Mark or Veronica. Their names had faded from public discourse, swallowed by the ignominy of their downfall. Their empire had crumbled, their reputations shattered, their ambitions reduced to dust. They were distant, irrelevant footnotes in the vibrant, unfolding narrative of my life. The vindication I felt was not vengeful, but a quiet, profound satisfaction that integrity, ultimately, had prevailed. One crisp autumn evening, I stood on the highest vantage point of the Resilience estate, overlooking the vast, glittering expanse of the Pacific. The sky was a canvas of deep blues and purples, speckled with the first bright stars. The air was cool, carrying the scent of salt and betha, eucalyptus. Below me, the lights of the city twinkled like scattered jewels, a testament to human endeavor. My home, bathed in the soft glow of its own thoughtfully designed lighting, radiated warmth and peace. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey had been arduous, marked by unimaginable pain and profound betrayal. But it had also been a journey of self-discovery, of unwavering resolve, and ultimately of profound liberation. I had lost a marriage, but I had found myself. I had been threatened with ruin, but I had built an empire, not of material wealth alone, but of purpose, integrity, and genuine connection. The future stretched before me, an unfolding horizon of limitless possibilities. There was no lingering fear, no shadow of the past to dim the vibrant present. My life was truly my own, a masterpiece I had meticulously designed, brick by emotional brick, moment by courageous moment. I was Clara Reynolds, the architect of my own extraordinary destiny, completely unbound, utterly self-defined, and endlessly wonderfully free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.